Welcome to Life Planning 101, brought to you by Smart Money Group and Kennedy Financial Services in Eastland, Texas. Tune in every week as we share important information to help you and your family live life on purpose. Insurance, investments, legacy and tax planning, and much more. All covered now on Life Planning 101.
Here we are with another episode of Black and White Market Chatter on Life Planning 101. Matt, Ervin, and Aaron Kennedy here with you today. We want to talk to you about a few things. First, I want to give Aaron props. He flew solo on Market Minute the other day. He survived to tell about it.
Yeah, that's kind of unbelievable for me. I really didn't think I was going to get through that.
No, that's good. That's good. So we're here today. We wanted to do a little different twist on the show and just talk to you about risk. And risk comes tolerance, capacity, and composure. And we're going to get into some of that, but we first want to lay the foundation of some of the foundations that we look at and how they get things done. When we talk about pensions and TRS and Harvard, Yale endowments, things like that. Aaron, talk a little bit about why they can do what they do.
Great question. When it comes to pension and the different risk, most of the time when you hear us talking about risk, probably the thing that goes through your mind is the market going up and down and whether you can hang on to it.
Like volatility, right? We talk about volatility all the time.
And that's such a huge part of it. But there's so much more to risk than we usually even talk about because, we can dig so far down. But one of the big ones is liquidity needs, cash flow needs, and timing. So going back to the pensions, they know what their cash flow needs have to be every single month if they're liquidating quarterly, yearly, and that is a risk for them because they need the interest payments, they need the stocks that they may be liquidating to perform a certain way, they need the interest rates to stay a certain way or they'll be selling at a loss or vice versa. So, pensions usually have a pretty tight risk control, especially when it comes to volatility, but also on cash flow, liquidity. They usually take their bonds and have them maturing what they call ladders, where they have something coming due on dates that they need that cash. Right. So they're a lot more disciplined than your average investor. And I hate to say that. I don't know if they're more disciplined, but they
plan different, right?
They plan different.
So you got to think about people that are on a pension or could have a pension. Teachers are one of those. A lot of municipalities or things of that nature may have a pension. A lot of the corporate pensions are kind of out. You've seen some people still have them, but that risk mostly was on the company, right? It was that defined benefit plan.
Yeah, it was an actuarial number. Right. And think about this, when most bonds were paying 7%, that was a pretty safe place to park money, and they would have a known cash flow from their bonds or whatever, and they wouldn't have to fund it near as much as when interest rates were 3%.
Right.
You have to have more than twice the money if you have the same allocation. Right. To get the same cash flow, and those companies have to provide that money to those pensions, so.
Well, and you always hear too, what cool things that, I think it's cool, right? I like the investments and getting under the hood, but what, the types of exposure they can take because of those variables, right? Those are fixed variables. They don't have somebody calling up and say, hey, I need my pension payment today and I need some more tomorrow. It's like, no. You kind of, as I tell my kids, you get what you get and you don't throw a fit, right?
It's the second Tuesday of every month and I don't care.
That's right. Yeah. So you get it when you get it. So that opens up a whole nother level of investing that these things can have access to because they have the known variables. And, it kind of takes out that emotion. We talked about the composure. Their composure isn't tied to the volatility. They have the discipline in that area. And, institutional investors are supposed to have that composure. And
yes.
Nobody's perfect, right?
But it doesn't mean they do. We see them make dumb mistakes all the time, but they're supposed to understand the movement of the markets.
Right.
And they're supposed to make better decisions, and they're not supposed to let emotions drive what they're doing.
Yeah. So, Aaron, let's take a quick break, and we'll take that idea and kind of relate it to the everyday investor here in just a second on Black and White Market Chatter on Life Planning 101. And we're back with our next piece of our show today on Black and White Market Chatter on Life Planning 101. We just talked about endowments and pensions and things that are hopefully not tied emotionally, but that pay out, and really trying to drill down on cash flows and why, especially times like these, that the removal of that emotion is so important to your investing, and it can expose you to many more things. But let's talk about more the retail investor, and this doesn't mean retail like off the shelf at Walmart retail. This means, the average person, right? We're not talking about, an institution, a bank, etc. We're talking about people, the real people that we work with. So we're talking about cash flow there, and we always say it. We got to get our risk right. But we kind of posed a certain concept area that we were talking about just before the show. We got to get our cash right. Can you expand on that a little bit?
Liquidity is such a big thing, and if you think about it, if you broaden your horizon, and if I say liquidity, it does not mean I can sell this today. It means I get to sell it when I want to, whenever that might be, or I have a plan to have it sold at a certain day. Kind of where I'm going, I was reading an article, and it was talking about this closed-end fund. I think it was BlackRock Science and Technology, and it was down 50%. They could sell it today. But, if you take a step back and say, I'm a business owner and I own these companies, and I am waiting for them to perform as they should, is BlackRock Science and Technology really a liquid position? Would you be willing to cut those businesses' valuation in half just to get out of it today? No, I would say no. So that is not a liquid position.
Right.
So if you have cash needs, you need instruments that are going to behave similar to cash or something very low volatility for your needs today.
So to kind of stop you right there, you talked about that particular fund in a way that everything has a cycle to it, right? And the trick would be, you don't put everything on the same cycle. So when one thing's bad, not everything's bad, right? So there's always a place. We talk a lot about liquidity, but also like savings to spend, things like that give you a certain timeline, right?
Yeah, that's a great thing. I mean, just think about, everybody's been educated since they first started working that they need to be planning for their future, invest, dollar cost averaging. Something simple, something boring, something that you don't think about. This is a saving to spend in the future. And you shouldn't be worried about the volatility. You should actually welcome volatility in that kind of stuff. But on times like today, and if you're using your money, you need to have certain assets that you can get to willingly and easily without giving up any of your future returns. You need to have something earmarked for what I need today. Right. And that there's two ways that people get hurt by this. Number one, it's not having that I'm going to get my check every Tuesday or second Tuesday of every month. It's picking up the phone, calling me and saying, hey, I'm buying a new truck. Do I have the money? No. Well, too bad. I'm doing it anyway.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. So that's a forced liquidity event that nobody's planned for. And is it the right time? If it was this year, no.
Right.
Your truck is 20% more expensive and the market's gone the other way.
Yeah, well, that's interesting, to kind of think through things that hurt people. It's themselves, right? And it's not always things that they can avoid. And, we were talking about going to school as a kid. When your car breaks down, usually, mom or dad can bail you out. So maybe your liquidity needs aren't as much. But when you are mom or dad and your kid calls you, It's on a different shoot.
Your liquidity is a lot different.
So
You need a lot more cash than you would normally have.
Right, and so we talk that 4% withdrawal rate. We talk about that a lot.
Yes.
But if you're at 4% as the market as January, and we're 15-20% off of that,
Yes.
did we take 15 or 20% discount on our income? No, probably not, because Americans, we don't work on a variable budget, right? That's just it. We work on
Yes.
kind of a pension mentality. And so, is that payment versus the fixed cost with inflation, are they matching up? And the answer is no in most cases.
Yeah. No, it's not in most cases. And people live paycheck to paycheck, and there's no, you said it, there's no variability in what they're spending. In the perfect world, you may be taking a 4% distribution, but you're socking something away in your bank account or something for a rainy day. And if you're doing that, congratulations, that's paid off this year.
Right.
But if every single thing that you have is being spent, and we have a year like this year where a lot of prices are up 18% or so, you're calling us and wanting more so you can eat the same food and keep the same temperature in your house.
Right.
And we're selling more of your assets in a bad time.
And Jim said it the other day at one of our events. He said, we've developed our habits based off a bigger budget, which created our behaviors and our disciplines, right? And did we make new habits with new information of the market? Most of the time, no. So we've been working off this bigger inflated budget when all this money was flushed in the economy, and now it's payback time, if you will. So,
well, we're humans. We're all humans, and the market's up 70% of the time. Mm-hmm. So what's that feel like? 70% of the time, it feels like
happy
all the time.
Right. Right.
But does that math work? No. But behaviorally, it does.
Right.
But we get to these times like now, and all of a sudden, it's not working. It's not as rosy of a picture, and all that time that in the back of our mind, we're saying, "Hey, I got to hold some back." It didn't get done. Because it's always going to be great.
That's right.
So now we're in trouble.
Aaron, let's take another quick break as we wrap up today. We'll be right back with you for the third and final segment of Black and White Market Chatter on Life Planning 101. Here we are for the third and final segment of this episode of Black and White Market Chatter on Life Planning 101. We're picking up, so we've decided basically that we're victims of our own circumstance in some regard, but we have a process to combat that. Aaron, let's kind of drive that home. So we talked about how big pensions, hedge funds, endowments, etc. kind of survive. We talked about some of the headwind that folks face, especially this time. Let's talk about our process, about the process of investing, really how we relate risk, time, and return to formulate that customized situation.
Yes. Everybody has a different risk tolerance, and everybody has a different cash needs. So the biggest problem we run into is trying to match those two together. And through time, it's going to work out either way, as long as you can stay very disciplined. But it's times like now that really stress it. And I think Matt said it at the beginning, is, there's a three-legged stool when it comes to risk. It's tolerance, it's capacity, and it's the behavioral.
The composure.
The composure. So while if I'm comfortable driving 100 miles an hour, that would be my risk tolerance. If I need to make it to grandma's house in 2 hours and it's only 60 miles away, my capacity says I don't really need to drive 100 miles an hour. Right. Or, if let's go the other way. I'm only comfortable driving 50 miles an hour and I got to be at grandma's house 100 miles away in an hour. That changes my capacity.
That's right.
I've got to change my risk,
Right.
And my behavior would say how willing I would be to do that.
Right.
Would I rather be late? Would I rather be on time? So we look at all of these when we're trying to put together someone's portfolio. And it all changes during times, especially stressful times. We always say stressful times changes that, and life events.
Right, that's right.
Something can happen in your life, and the risk that you weren't taking is just, it's not worth it anymore.
That's right. I think you said, what did you say, something about swimming with the sharks? As a kid, you would have loved to do that, maybe ride one of them. Now, as an adult, I might stay out of the water.
Yeah,
you know?
the water, that doesn't even sound fun to me anymore.
No.
I don't even want a boogie board.
Right,
You know?
that's fun. So, about Composure, there was a gentleman we visited with today that talked about volatility, and he said everybody's okay with volatility until they face volatility, or something to that regard. And it was very interesting to think about that, because we all, we go through something called a stress test a lot in our portfolio. If you invest with us, you've seen it. We talk about what things could look like with your portfolio, and most time people are okay with that, and until it happens, and we go back. But through that education, so we're victims of investor bias, every one of us.
Yes.
Right? So through education, we can help with that composure, so you can take the risk tolerance you need with as much capacity as you can.
Right. Education's wonderful. And going back to the behavioral part, if we look at COVID, March of 2020, all of that market movement happened basically in a month.
Right.
And then we'd go back to our stress tests and say, hey, look, this is what happened, and you were fine with that. You signed off, and everybody said, yeah, it's great. But I don't even think they experienced a full statement of what really happened during that time.
No.
Now, I don't think the market's down as much as it was during COVID, but this has been a 12-month beating.
Right.
Every envelope, and thank you, our custodian, for sending statements, but every time you open one of those, we're going through 12 months of this, so it wears on you.
Right.
So how long can you stay disciplined?
Right.
And that feeds itself into what we're looking for when we're taking these kind of measurements, and directly affects your liquidity needs and how much money we need to have on the sidelines so we don't make adverse decisions during times like now.
Right, and I think most people would say if they saved a little bit when times were good, when things are great, you're like, yeah, we can go out to eat that one more time. But what if you saved that versus, put it back for that rainy day, and that way you always have a little something in your pocket, right? That's what if you listen to your parents and grandparents, your great grandparents, that's what you need to do.
Yeah, and then they were awesome at it. Think about the time periods that they lived through, and this was their way of life. Not ours anymore.
Right.
Instant gratification.
Right.
Oh, that looks cool. Hand me my phone. I'm going to buy that on Amazon. Cool. It's going to be here tomorrow at 2 o'clock.
Right, before you get home.
Yeah,
That's
there ain't no
exactly
more savings.
No, but that's the ticket home, though, is that each of us have a unique composure, a unique capacity, and a unique tolerance, and it's based around our plan. We have a plan in place to take it, and we know exactly what risk you need to take or return you need to make, or the timeline you need to take it based on those factors. We can work through that. There's nothing cookie cutter.
And remember, that was probably the most profound thing that has been said during this meeting, is the time you need to take it. Nobody's plan blows up in 2022. We're planning for the rest of your life, and we took into account that the market goes up and down.
Right. Yeah, and for the most part, we're planning much longer than you are. Folks are, I'm never going to live to see it. Well, Mr. and Mrs. Client, we hope that you do, and you're still going to have money when you do.
I'll be dead by 82. Well, I'm going to plan for you to be alive at 96.
Yeah, that's right. But that's great. So if you have any questions about this or want to dig in deeper to tolerance, capacity, or composure, we'd love to visit with you about it and help you get, some of those disciplines and engage in your portfolio like we see with some of the big pensions and such. That's the biggest thing. Aaron, do you have any last minute words before we get wrapped up today?
No, hang on. This is a big week. I think I read 47% of the S&P earnings are coming out this week.
That's right.
So we should see something in the market. Don't be affected one way or the other. It's 1 week of the rest of your life.
That's right.
Hold on.
Appreciate each and every one of you, and that concludes today's episode of Black and White Market Chatter on Life Planning 101.
Thank you for joining us for Life Planning 101, brought to you by Smart Money Group and Kennedy Financial Services. If you have questions, you can email them to lifeplanning@kennedy-financial.com. Don't forget to learn how our sister company can assist you with all of your tax, bookkeeping, and consulting needs. You can find out more at briscoeandassociates.com. Be sure to tune in next week for more Life Planning 101. The opinions expressed herein are those of the firm and are subject to change without notice. The opinions referenced are as of the date of publication and are subject to change due to changes in the market or economic conditions and may not necessarily come to pass. Any opinions, projections, or forward-looking statements expressed herein are solely those of the author, may differ from the views or opinions expressed by other areas of the firm, and are only for general informational purposes as of the date indicated. Securities offered through Calton & Associates Incorporated, a registered investment advisor, member FINRA SIPC. Investment advisory services offered through Smart Money Group LLC. Kennedy Financial Services and Smart Money Group LLC are separate entities and are not owned or controlled by Calton & Associates Incorporated.